All right, we're at chapter 9. I'm going to take a couple slides and let's look at some review. Last time, Nifal stem, right? Because we're about to go into Hifil. So we've been introduced to the cow, we've been introduced to the Nifal, now we're about to be introduced to the Hifil. Let's look at the Nifal real quick to see the differences here. We are in chapter 9 of Martin's book. TV's not on. Here, let me get it turned on. Good. There you go. We're in chapter 9 of Martin's book, as I said. The Nifal stem diagnostic features. The single most important diagnostic feature is the noon prefix, right? Pre meaning coming before. That's on the perfect of the Nifal stem and the participle in one form of the infinitive absolute. Okay. So that's a telltale sign. However, when you have the Nifal stem and you're looking at the imperfect, the imperative, and the other forms of the infinitive absolute, that noon is what is called assimilated, meaning that it disappears. Okay. We have that in English, like is immoral spelled with 2 M's or 1 M? Spelled with 2 M's. I'm trying to think of a word that does this. I just saw an example today. Well, you know how certain words, when you add ing or an er to it, right? It'll lose the spelling. Like a liar changes constantly. Lie, liar, lied. How that spelling will change, and sometimes things will get, or in such as you have a doubling of vowels. You have a double e. Sometimes it'll just be just one e when you add the er or the ing in English. Same kind of idea here. It gets assimilated. In Hebrew, though, you can see here at the bottom of the screen, Yikatel. Yikatel is the Nifal imperfect third masculine singular from Katal. That noon is assimilated into Kof. Okay, that little bitty red dot right there, that's where that noon went. You can still hear it, Yikatel, Yikatel, right? Yik, Yik-ka-tel. It's 3 syllables, really, because that is a Dagesh Forte. Tells us that there's something. I remember way back I told you the Dagesh Fortes and the Dagesh Lanes would become more important. That's telling us right there, okay, something's going on here. There's a doubling going on. Why is there doubling in this verb? That's because it is a Nifal, right? Nifal is a passive verb. That too, that's the meaning of the Nifal. Perfect, Nikital, Nikital, imperfect, Yikatel, imperative, Hikatel, infinitive construct, Hikatel, infinitive absolute, Nikatol, Nikatol, participle, Nikatal. All right, you hear the Ika, 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 Ika. That's a telltale sign you're dealing with the Nifal also. You got the noon, you get the assimilated noon, and then you've got the Ika, Ika, Ika kind of noise that goes on when you're translating Nifals. That's how you tell. Another way you can tell sometimes is context. You kind of pick it apart from the context and everything going on in the passage. So we're going to look at the Hifil, or Hifil, H-I-P-H-I-L. It's spelled H-I-F-I-L in your book, right? So it'll be H-I-P-H-I-L on my slides because I borrowed these slides from the other Hebrew book. The Hofal, or the H-O-P-H-A-L, Hofal stem, pronounced the same way, just different spellings in the English version. You're taking a Hebrew word, change it to transliterating it to English, just spelled a different way between an F and a PH. I hope that doesn't confuse y'all. So, as I said so far, we've had the cow, the Nifal. So here's the type of actions we're dealing with. The cow is a simple action that's active, right? And he said, right? And he said, simple completed action. Nifal is passive, right? Receive the passive action, receiving the action. Remember how we talked about active and passive? Trey threw the ball, right? And then the ball was thrown at Trey or something like that. You know what I'm saying? The ball was thrown, right? The ball isn't doing the action. The ball is receiving. He's part of the act. It's passive in the action. Someone else is throwing the ball. And Trey is active, throwing the ball. Nifal, it's a passive. Reflexive would be Trey threw himself. Trey did the action to himself. That's a reflexive type of action. Hifil is active, so it's like the cow in a certain sense, but it's causative. And what that means is that the subject is causing directly this action to happen. It's not something we necessarily have in English. We would say this in English, but we don't bring it out the way Hebrew does. Trey caused the ball to be thrown. Trey caused. Most times it'd be something like this. Trey caused Aiden to throw the ball. It's a causative type of thing. A hofal is a causative action, but it's in the passive voice. And that's what we're going to look at today. Piel, Pual, and Hifpael is what we have left. I don't think Pual is even covered in this book, if I remember right. The meaning of the Hifil stem, causative, an action with an active voice. Hizakir, Hizakir. He caused to remember. Okay, so we probably clean that up and say he was reminded. Right? You see how that's kind of going to there. There's declarative meaning. Subject of the verb declares something being a certain condition or its state of being. Here, shiu. They declare someone to be guilty. Okay, changes an intransitive verb to a transitive verb. He gadil, he made someone great rather than to be great, right? He is great. It's he made someone great. Simple active, simple action with the active voice. So sometimes it can be translated simply as a cow. Hishakim. Shakam is to rise early in the morning. Hishkim. He arose early. So you can see it's a little bit more complex in the cow than Nifal. Hifil is starting to get a little bit broader of meanings. Causative is the most common, I'd say. And then right after that's going to be declarative. And I would probably say it's in order of occurrence here from what I remember, what I know. Simple action, you do find that here and there, but causative and declarative is the most common from what I know. Here's the top 10 Hifil verbs. Bo, you'll find this a whole lot. Bo in the cow means to go in or to enter, but in the Hifil it means to bring in or come in, cause to bring. See how that's a pretty good example of how the Hifil verb affects the meaning of the verb. Cow, to go, to enter in. Jonah entered into the ship, but if you were to want to bring something, it's in the Hifil. It's active, causative. I'm going to cause it to enter, or in other words, I'm going to bring it. Right? Red means that they only appear in Hifil. Now, ka, yes, go ahead. So in context, Bo would not matter because if Bo is in the Hifil, it always means to bring. If Bo is in the cow, it always means to enter. See what I'm saying? So it's really affecting meaning now. Now, certain words you can look at and from context kind of get, you know what, this is in the Hifil. This probably just needs to be translated as a simple action. There are words that do that. Nakah only appears in the Hifil, and it means to strike, to smite, to beat, strike, dead, destroy. See, this is one of those examples. That seems like a simple action. Okay. In the Hifil, it just still always means a simple action. It doesn't have that causative type of thing going on, like to cause. It just means to strike, smite, beat, nakah. Shuv is one of those that goes back and forth, and it's quite common in the Hebrew Bible. Shuv means to turn back or return. Hifil, it means to cause someone to return or to even restore. Nagad, tell, announce, report. See, that's always in the Hifil, and that has sort of a simple meaning still. Yitzah, to go or to come out. Hifil, to cause to go or cause to come out, to lead out, to bring out. Allah, to go up, to ascend. Hifil, bring out or offer up a sacrifice. And that's when it's always most often used in that sense. Allah is a word that's usually used for to bring up a sacrifice. It would raise up to the heavens. It's kind of that idea. And the ancient Near Eastern thought about gods. There's actually a Mesopotamian myth that when you made a sacrifice and the smoke of that sacrifice rose up, the gods would kind of get into that smoke, and that smoke goes up to the heavens, right? You can kind of see how the thoughts go. Gods would get into that smoke and they would smell it and it would appease them, it would calm them down. Like gods are angry. You heard that? Gods are angry to make a sacrifice. That's the idea. The gods are angry. They're going to make a sacrifice to make them happy. Okay. And so that smell will get up in there and it would be a pleasing aroma. So the idea of offering up a sacrifice is you offer up the sacrifice with the smoke. Natsal is in the Nifal, to be rescued, delivered, or saved. In the Hifil, it means to tear from, take away from, or deliver from. Okay. So Nifal, that's a good example of passive and the active voice. Nifal is passive, right? Aden was rescued. Did Aden do anything? Aden did nothing. Aden was rescued. All right. Hifil, Aden was torn, or excuse me, Aden tore away from his mother. Aden was delivered from Aden was delivered from his mother, something like along those ideas. Yasa, to be delivered, victorious, receive help. The Nifal and the Hifil, it simply means help, save, deliver, rescue, come to the aid of. Yasa. I think that is where we get Yeshua, right there in that word, if I'm not mistaken. That's part of that family of Sa, to be delivered, victorious, to save, right? Hifil. But then the noun version of that would be Yeshua or Yeshav. Yeshua, Yeshah, I believe. And that would be salvation, Yesah. And then Yeshua would be the name, Jesus, and Joshua, salvation, deliverer. Joshua would probably be better as translated as someone who's a deliverer. He delivered them to the promised land. He delivered them from the hand of the Canaanites. That's kind of Joshua's role in the Old Testament. Karav, to approach, to draw near, to come near. Hifil means to bring it near, present an offering, sacrifice an offering. Karav. Yalad, bear children, to give birth. And the Hifil means to be the father of, to cause someone to bring birth, right? To father children, beget children. You'll find that in the genealogies, Yalad. You find it in Genesis whenever Abraham begot Jacob and those type of things. That's Yalad. Any questions on that? I think that list is helpful, in my opinion. It kind of helps you start seeing that range of meaning we've got going on in the Hifil. Diagnostic features. The most important diagnostic feature of the Hifil stem is the hey stem prefix, like noon in the Nifal, right? So it's a little more complicated in meaning, but in recognition, it's just as easy as the Nifal is, if not easier in some ways. I think this is actually easier to recognize. In the perfect, the imperative, the infinitive construct, and the infinitive absolute, the Hifil stem prefix of hey is presented, okay? Hikatil, hikatil, hick, 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 hikatil. I don't think the schwa there is pronounced hiktil. That sound right, Aiden? Trey? Hiktil? I'm not sure. I don't think the schwa there should be pronounced. Look at your cheat sheet, is a heric, a long verb, short vowel or long vowel? That'll tell me. It's short, correct? It's a shortened verb of it's a shortened version of Sarai. Sarai is the long. Very, very front page. Y'all ain't got it? I don't think I've got it with me either. I think heric is a short vowel, because I think heric is a short vowel, and I think Sarai is the actual long vowel. I believe so. Because the E class and I class kind of do go together. I'm going to say hiktil. In the imperfect and in the participle, the Hifil stem prefix drops out. Yaktil. Stem vowel in the Hifil stem is normally a heric, yod, or Sarai. Okay, right here, over here on this side, the bottom. Hik teal, you notice the heuric yod right here. It's extremely common in the hymn. It's called a stem vowel, meaning it's the vowel in the middle of the stem. We're looking up here at the board. Vi yomer, stem vowel would be that sagol underneath the name up there on that very first one. That's the stem vowel. All right, so the stem vowel is usually going to be heuric yod. It can often be a therapy. Okay? That's a diagnostic feature also. You're going to find in that center, in that middle consonant of your stem word. If we're looking at this, that middle consonant would be main on Vayomer. Center consonant, that was in the hifil, it'll either be a heuric yod or serene. But every time. Martin gives shamar, right, for his. I did Katal just to make it easier on me making the slides instead of having to type everything out. Martin also gives on page 96, he gives his own list of those type of verbs that go back and forth. He has akal, ate. He caused to eat, which means he fed. Shamar, he kept. He caused to keep. Katal, he caused to kill. Zav, he girded. He caused to gird. You see that causative nature. Those last three we looked at already. Yatzah, he went out, but in the hifil, he brought out, kind of like Bo does. Bo, he came, and the hifil, he brought. Gadal, he was great, and the hifil, he caused to be great, or he exalted. Okay. But on 97 for the hifil perfect, his example, Martin uses shamar. But on page 101, you'll find him using katal like he does here. And if you go to 105, you've got the list that we're looking at right now, comparing the cow, the nifal, the hifil, and the hofal. On page 105, with the katal verb. Katal means to kill. Okay, kill. So these are the lists I'm going to be looking at up on the slides. This 105 example. Katal. If you guys ever look at any other Hebrew grammars, it's always going to be katal. Martin uses shamar. I want to ask him why he used shamar on my next semester when I have him, but he uses shamar. Okay. You see the comparison between the cow and the hifil here on the slide. I think that's helpful. You can see it on page 105 also. Different order on page 105, Trey. Correct? Yeah. Martin starts with the first common singular. Miles Van Pelt starts with third masculine singular. But
that order
that order seems weird. This one makes more sense because it's the way I learned it. But now that I've read Martin's book and I see that way, that does make sense. I think it would have helped me a whole lot when I was writing out. Because I mean I had to memorize 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1. I had to do it just like that because it was hard. Hurt my brain. But Hikatil caused to kill. Hikatala, she caused to kill. Hiktelta, you caused to kill. Hiktelte, so on and so forth. We know the cow perfect. But look here. What we got going on here in every one of these? We got going on in every single thing. Hey, hear it, right? Hey, heuric and schwa in that very first vowel. You've got this going on very consistently. That's a big marker that you're dealing with a hifil. Problem is you might get this confused with a definite article. That happens to me quite often. Once you realize in context that this is a verb, right? Not just looking at another word. I recognize that this is a verb. It kind of starts helping. This can be quite confusing at first because you're trained already to think, okay, that means the something, right? Does not mean the something. One of the things that help you is that heuric yod. Now the HERIC is not consistent through the perfect. One of the diagnostic features, the perfect Miles and Felt points out, is actually a class valve and the stem valve Pothok. Doesn't necessarily help us because we were just told it's a HERIC and serrae, whatever, right? Big thing here is remember it's that hey HERIC. Hifil imperfect. If you notice, you've got the HERIC or the serrae constantly throughout this whole stem, right? That's your constant thing. It's either HERIC or serrae. The other thing is the Pothok underneath your formative. Okay, Yod, Pothok, Tav, Pothok, Tav, Pothok. Compare that to the cow when you're imperfect, which is a HERIC, or a Segol when it's under the Aleph. Even under the Aleph, though, in this, it's still a Pothok. So every single time it's a Pothok. And then you have HERIC, Yod, or serrae. And only two of them use serrae, and that's the third feminine plural and the second feminine plural. Yiktil. Hear that? Excuse me. Yaktil. Yaktil. Taktil. Taktil. Taktili. Aktil. Yaktilu. Taktel. Taktil na. Words are getting longer, right? They're getting more difficult. But you hear how that sounds different than a cow, right? If I was going to pronounce cow, first common singular, ecto. That's quite different than the first common singular here. Actil, ecto, actil. Pronouncing is going to help get that. Okay, that's not a cow. You're going to realize that as you continue to work in Hebrew. You realize, I know that's not a cow because it just doesn't sound right. Remember that A-class vowel, though. Pothok. You feel imperatives in the cow, Ketol, Ketoli, Ketolu, Ketol. Nah. Tell me something about the imperatives that y'all remember. Remember how the imperatives we only have it in the second person, and it is a copy of the imperfect, except we drop the performative. Okay, so if you got the second masculine singular, see the schwa and the holum as the vowel pointings in the second masculine singular of the cow. Let's go back. Second masculine singular of the cow, we have schwa, holum. What did we lost? We lost Tav here. Same thing here, except in the Hifil, what we're going to get, we're going to get a hey. All right, it's going to retain that Hifil stem hey and help us out quite a bit. It's the same vowel pointings as you have over here, but you're getting the Hifil, the Hifil diagnostic feature of the hey come back to help us out a little bit. Haktel, haktili, haktilu, haktelena, haktelena, right? Cause to kill, right? And it's a command. The imperative is command. You kill or you cause to kill. Infinitive constructs, infinitive absolutes. Infinitive constructs is we're still retaining that Hifil diagnostic feature of the hey. So the only one we haven't had that in so far is the imperfect. Hakatil, 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 hakatil. Notice we also have the serrae on the absolute, and here yod on the infinitive construct. Hifil participles do something kind of weird. Put a mame on the front. I'm pretty sure they're the only participles do that. Let me look at later on in the book. Make sure I got something wrong. I think it's the only ones that does that. Kofal does it. Never mind, I lied. PL does it. Pual does it. Hifbale does it. So verbs from now on do it. I was quite wrong. My bad. All right. But we're having that MAME. That's a diagnostic feature. And your other one is that E-class vowel, the stem. There you go. That was just what I looked up. Your participle prefixes are noon for the nifal, maim for the hifil, maim comets or maim kibbutz for the hofal, and then pl, pual, and hifbaal. I'll include that maim also. So in summary, we've got a hirik as a diagnostic feature, the hirik yod as a diagnostic feature, the imperfect, which is the only one besides the participle that doesn't have the hey. You've got an A-class vowel into the performative, hirik yod. Imperative, you get a sere, hirik yod, hays. Infinitive construct, hey, hirik yod. Infinitive absolute, hey, sere. Participle, A-class vowel, hirik yod, right? So your big things to watch for is hey, right? Hey in front of your, I mean, that's in every one of these but two. Okay, so 4 out of the 6 have a hey. And every one of them, except some of the perfects, have either a hirik yod or a sere in the stem vowel as the stem vowel. And then the other thing to look for is the A-class vowel under the very first letter right here. Pathak, 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 pathak. Okay, so there's your 3 things. Most of the time, what you also have, Mark doesn't necessarily flesh out a whole lot in his book, is what's called weak verbs. Get into the weak verbs later on. I don't think we will be able to do it together if we quit around chapter 14 or 15 as we talked about. Starts looking at weak verbs, chapter 13. And so weak verbs start changing a little bit. That's the problem. So weak, for example, now a guttural versus A-class vowels. So if you have a verb stem that is spelled with a aleph main resh, like R is, or you have a verb stem that's spelled with an ayin, or a verb stem that's spelled with a het. You know, those are going to prefer A-class vowels, not schwas. So what that does, and such as this right here, that kof will be replaced with a ayin. Well, you're gonna mess up the whole verb system. That's when it starts getting tricky. Okay, that's later on. Mark covers that. Use the confused forms. Right here, Yakatil and Ya Amod, Ya Amod. This is a prime example. What I was just talking about. This is anticipating our questions and answers right here on the side. I made this last week, so I don't remember what's next. Let's see right here. This is count imperfect, our masculine singular. What should that be? That shouldn't be a apothic. That should be a what? Hirik, right? Tick told, all right? Hirik. Boy, I got going on. Well, we've got this guttural, the ayin, rejecting the vocal schwa, upgrading that vocal schwa to a, excuse me, rejecting the schwa completely, upgrading that schwa to a hatef pathak. What it also does effectively is create the hirik. It bumps up to a pathak in that first stem. So that's where it starts getting confusing, big time. What we have to know is, okay, this doesn't have assimilated noon. We don't see any signs of assimilated noon. We don't see a sere or a hirik yod as the stem vowel. We do have as a cholam. We've got a formative yod, and we've got a cholam. Has to be a gal. Okay, you start having to become a detective a little bit. Let's figure out some of these. That's why the cheat sheets are helpful, right? Use the cheat sheet like crazy. An ideal situation is you memorize the cheat sheet. That's actually what you do if you're in a college class. You already have that memorized completely by now. So using and referencing it, and the thing that you guys can benefit from is not rote memorization of the paradigms. You guys can benefit from is using the paradigms, and the more you use the paradigms, the more translation, the more sentences you're introduced to. You know, third, fourth, fifth time you have to look up the Amar, right, by Yomer, you're gonna be like, I know what that is now. I know that's a cow imperfect or masculine singular. I know what that is. I know how to parse that. So that's how you guys get to learn it. If you want to learn the paradigms, do it. I mean, y'all haven't had necessarily time to do it. Those of you watching, I know that y'all haven't had the time to do it either, but that's the ideal way to learn and be able to know the differences. So I can memorize cow, right? And that might be a way to do it too. Memorize cow, because once you get cow down, you get 70% of the verbs in the Hebrew Bible done. You can just go through the cow paradigms and have those down pat. Any of these other paradigms that appear not very often in the Hebrew Bible, such as yeah, 04. So 68.8% of the verbs are cow. So if you memorize cow, you've almost got 70% of all verbs in the Hebrew Bible memorized. Ifal is 5%. That's a lot less. Okay. That's a big drop. You don't necessarily have to memorize all the Nifal paradigms, because if you know the cow paradigms, they all copy each other, right? Difference in the Nifal is going to be that noon, that assimilated noon. Hifil consists of 13%, so Hifil is pretty important. Then when you go past Hifil, Hofal is only 0.6%, what we're about to learn next, okay? So for you guys not being in a college class, you're not taking Hebrew 3 next semester, Hebrew 4, just memorize cow. That's what I'd focus on, knowing cow to the best of your ability. That way when something else comes up, you know it's not a cow and you can look it up. Does that make sense? And I think you guys could even right now recognize if it's a Nifal or not. I really do. I think even right now you could you can almost figure out, I don't think that's a Nifal. Okay. I don't think that's a cow. I think that's more Nifal. You got the noon and the yika, 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 every one of them. Hifil gets a little bit more tricky, but it's only 13%. And it's not like it's a giant number of the verbs in the Hebrew Bible. Next, we're going to look at the Hofal. Do I have any questions before we move on to Hofal? I saw that face, Trey. Hofal stem, 0.6%. So you have 1,000. Yeah, if you have 1,000 verbs, 6 of them will be Hofals. Okay. So right now, if you were to look at 1,000 verbs, guys have, that means 688 of them will be Cal. That means 131 of them is Hifil, and then you've got 6 of them so far. So that's your comparison, right? Quite a few less. 508 of them. 508 of them would be, excuse me, 58 of them in Nifal. 58 of them in Nifal, 130 of them would be, well, 6 of them in Hofal. So it's not very common. But if you know Cal, right? If you get Cal now, you kind of understand Hifil, you're going to get Hofal. It's going to make sense. The meaning of the Hofal stem is the passive of the Hifil. Hofal stem is therefore used to express the causative action with a passive voice. He made someone king. That's Hifil. He caused him to be king. He made someone king. He Malik, Malik, He Malik. He was made king. Ha Malak, Ha Malak. He was made king. See that passive nature of it? See what Martin says here. Is it Hofal's passive counterpart to Hifil on page 100? He mentions the Hofal doesn't appear very often in the Bible. Hofal can be illustrated as follows. So a call, he ate the cow, would be he fed in Hifil, but in the Hofal it was he was fed, right? So that passive idea. Person being fed isn't doing anything, they're receiving the food. Okay, passive. Top 10 Hofal verbs, mut. Hofal being he was killed, to be killed. Cow, it's to die. Hifil, it's to kill, to put to death. Nagad, And the hifil is to tell, and the hofal is to be told something. Okay, the passive meaning starts coming out. Bo, mentioned in the cow, it's to enter into or go in. The hifil, it's to bring in. The hofal is to be brought. So Aden entered in the temple, that'd be cow. Aden brought, Aden caused to bring in his sacrifice, and he brought in his wife with him. Okay, see how the several different nuances of that verb in these different stems. Shazar, hofal participle, only appears in hofal participle. What this is saying, means twisted. All of these uses of that verb are in Exodus 26, chapter 26 to 39. Twist. Nakah means to strike. We looked at that last slides. Strike or smite. The hofal is to be struck down. So passive, right? Trey was struck down. Trey didn't do anything. Trey received that action. So it's a passive verb. Shalak, send, throw, to cast. Shalak. Jonah says in Jonah chapter 2, I was shalaked. I was cast from your side. Yet again, I will look into your holy temple. Hofal is to be thrown, to be cast, right? Hifil, Yabal, bring, a tribute. Hofal is to be brought. It only occurs 18 times in the Bible. Yatzak, pour out, to cast metal. Hofal is to be cast, okay? So I think y'all are getting the idea there.
Kind of like,
Kind of like the nifal to cow. Yeah, so see how,
you're not doing that, but whatever being done.
yes, the simple action is a cow. Simple action is a cow. Simple passive is a nifal. Positive action is hifil. Positive passive, hofal. All right, now cow and nifal go together. Hifil and hofal really go together. Diagnostic features are a hey, like we had in hifil. But what you can get is you're going to get a comments or a kibbutz prefix. The perfect, the hofal stem prefix is present. Who, katal, who, katal, who, kal, who, tall, who, katal, who, katal, who, katal. Gosh, who, katal. Yukatal, Yukatal. That's a fun one. In the imperfect participle, the hofal stems prefix has dropped out. Yukatal. See the kibbutz there? We haven't seen very many kibbutz happen. Yeah. So that's the thing. Hofal, and then there's one later on called the pual. It's gonna utilize the kibbutz, but here the kibbutz is gonna appear very front. Right? It's either gonna be under that hey, it's gonna be under that a form or the free form. Okay. Yukatal. In pual, it'll be in the middle of the word. It'll take place that stem vowel. Here, it's going to be in the very front of the word. Yukatal. Stem vowel in the hofal stem is normally a pathak or a comments. Okay, so you've got the a vowel, stem vowel, and the a class vowel as the stem vowel, and you've got that kibbutz as that performative or that diagnostic feature of the stem, that hey, stem prefix. Questions on that? It's a lot of information, and it's kind of confusing every time you get introduced to one of these new verb stems. You're like, oh, but it'll get easier as you work with it. That's why your homework's so important. Okay. Okay, he does. So told you way back comment 1 on page 100 of Martin's book. This is the hofal perfect. It's characterized by a prefix, hey, comments. Note that the comments is actually comments katuf, which is a short O. This is a further comparison with the cow perfect, the hofal perfect. It explains that. So what we have underneath that hey is what I talked about way back in chapter 1, way back, the very beginning of our Hebrew class, how that comments is a long a. Here it's actually like you'd say, help me out. Oh, dog, dog, right? You say dog, you say dog, Hear that O in dog, but it actually makes a sound. Dog, dog. That's kind of the idea here with the comments. Khatoof, hawk, hawk, tall, hawk, tall. The thing too is they appear in both, so you're getting both here. Okay, hawk, tall, or hook, tall with the boots. Hook, tall, or hawk, tall. Hook, till yes. No, it's an O class fountain. 6 out of 1,000 track. That's all you gotta remember. 6 out of 1,000. I know. Hofal's messed me up. And I'll be honest, when I come to a Hofal, I either misparse it or I have to look it up. This isn't something that I just know when I'm reading. I'm not that good with the Hofals. They're difficult. Yeah.
Third Maxims.
Absolutely.
It translates the same.
I'm not going to argue with you because you're right.
Well, yeah.
Martin goes with the right-hand column. He goes with the O-class foul. I've seen it both ways that I could translate. I mean, they're just either, in my opinion, which is I don't have scientific data to back up what I'm saying here, but you see both just as often enough. You see the U-class foul, the kibbutz, and you also see that comments of tooth. You see it just as common. Main thing is the A-class foul in the stem, Hey as a stem prefix, and you got that U or that comments. Notice Hifil doesn't utilize the comments, does it? So there's a difference right there already. Hifil is going to have a what? Uses pathox, right? Here we've got the comments of tooth, and we also got the U class yesterday. Not in the perfect. Nope. Let me go back. They're the perfect, the imperfect, the participle. But the participles we use main. But we don't have. We've only got the only ones of these that appear in the Hebrew Bible is the perfect, the imperfect, and the participle. You don't have anything else. You don't have imperatives. You don't have infinitive constructs. You don't have anything else. You got perfect, imperfect, participle. None of the other ones appear in the Hebrew Bible. Yet again, A class vowel into the stem, kibbutz or comments, all the way through. Only one I see it's different on is the third masculine plural, where you have a schwa. That would be the only one that would probably be that and the second masculine plural. Those two would probably be kind of confusing. Seems as if when you have that ending on there, it's pulling it away. But you still have on the left-hand column, you still have the kibbutz, and you're never going to see that again, other than the Hofal, hual. So that already narrows it. When you see kibbutz, you need to think, okay, that's got to be a Hofal, or because even the vowel kibbutz is rare. Like this is probably the first time I think we've really even encountered it in the Hebrew book, right? Besides chapter 1 when we learned it. They're in my opinion, they're just rare. You don't see them. Like when you see it, your ears are gonna perk, your eyes are gonna that's something special. And the participle looks a lot like the Hifil participle, but because you got the main, but then you've got the kibbutz or you've got the comments of tooth. And you only got the comments of tooth in one of those. See that? Top right. Rest of it's going to be the kibbutz game. Muktal. Muktelet. Muktelim. Muktelim. Muktalim. Fun to say. And again, they're rare. Know the cow. Be able to recognize Hifil. And if you got that down, knowing the cow, knowing that you've got noons for Nephal, Hayes for Hifil, Erik Yod, Sarai, Hofal, you've got the kibbutz. You don't have to memorize the whole paradigms. Just know certain small things and you'll be able to do it like that. That'll help. I think you have to necessarily sit down and like, all right. I would sit down and try to memorize the cow the best you can. That would be my opinion. Try to do the cow the best you can. That would be one I'd say would be very helpful. Once you got it, as I said, you get 70%, and then everything else you can realize that's not a cow. Let's figure out what it is. Okay. And if you get logos, it's super easy. You just put your mouse over the top of it. It tells you what it is anyway. You know, I mean, it gets easier. Last couple slides and we'll be done. Participle prefixes and derived stems. I looked at this. That's the same slide we had a few minutes ago. Summary. Okay. Perfect. Hey. Kibbutz. A class vowel and stem vowel under the text. O class. Hey. Kamas Katuf, which is ha, katal, hakatal. Imperfect. Still have the kibbutz. You have the A class, the O class vowel, but you still got that pathak and the stem vowel. Participles, main, it's kind of like we do the hifil, but you still got the kibbutz or that strong O class vowel in the stem prefix. Okay. Do all the exercise you can. Study your vocab, because that's how you're going to be able to read and have more rewarding in reading. And review your verb stems. A good review for your verb stems. You're like, where do I even start? Either use your cheat sheet or go to page 105. Okay. 105, study your tail off for the cow, and then reference nifal, hifil, hofal. Okay. You don't necessarily have to memorize it, but when you're doing your homework, it's going to help you recognize the differences. So we're in a really cool time because every one of our exercises and 9E is going to be scripture. Okay. That gets fun. We're translating scripture right now from Hebrew to English. Pretty special stuff. So do every one of those you can. Now, I'm telling you, the more of those you can do, the better off you're going to be. It's going to reinforce your vocabulary. It's going to reinforce your parsing. It's going to reinforce your ability to recognize syntax. It's going to reinforce everything. The more of those exercises you can do, the better. Go back to 9A and look, see what we've got. He's got 4 and 9A. That's going to introduce simple hifil. He's got 9B, which is going to introduce the hifil imperfect. 9C is going to introduce hifil participles, the imperative, the imperfect. 9D is a parsing chart for hifil and hofal. That would probably be really helpful. You recognize the stem, state, person, gender, number, prefix, suffix, root, and then translate it. That would be a really good chart to work through. I would highly recommend that. And I would highly recommend doing at least all of 9E. And if you can, do the rest of 9A, B, and C also. They're just 3 or 4 sentences each. Do as many of 9E as you can, though, because that's, number one, that's scripture. That's good devotional time. And then number 2, that's going to be great practice for your vocab, great practice for your stems. Let's look over the vocabulary. Nafal, page 102. Fall. This is where we get Nephalim. Nephal means he fell. Nephalim is literally the fallen ones, right? That's the idea of the Nephilim. This is chapter 6, the fallen ones, or you could maybe translate it the ones who, in a hifil kind of sense, right? The ones who cause people to fall. Kind of that idea. I've heard it said that way also by one of my Hebrew professors. They cause people to fall. So the Nephilim and the Gibborim. The Gibborim are David's mighty men. The Gibborim, grammatically, I've also heard it argued that grammatically, Nephilim have more in common with the Gibborim grammatically in the way they're described than the Nephilim have in common with, say, Goliath's brothers. Meaning the Nephilim might not necessarily be giants. There were giants in those days, right? Nephilim is what is actually there in the Hebrew in the King James Version. The idea of giants comes from the book of Enoch. Okay, giants in those days. Grammatically, there's a better comparison with Gibborim, mighty men, meaning that Nephilim might not necessarily have been giants, but they possibly could have been warriors, great warriors that were born, kind of like Or we maybe think of like demigods, like Hercules and things like that. Possibly it's more like that because there's more a connection between Gibberim, Nephilim than there is between the Nephilim and the other giants such as Goliath and others we see. So the idea that they are the ones who fall others, right? They fall, they make others fall, kind of makes sense when you think of them as a warrior. Also makes sense in that demigod sense that they're the fallen, or fallen, right? So either way, Nephal, he fell. That's a way to help remember that word, fall, right? Nephilim. The fair. It's a fair. He countered, he wrote, you'll find it more, he counted or he wrote, you'll find it more as wrote. It's a fair. Sefer is also book, the noun version. Kabatz, he gathered. Kibbutz. Kibbutz in Israel is a gathering of communists. It's a communist village in Israel that they have. Everybody lives together on a farm and they share the food, and some people don't work and they take care of the village, and everyone's kids go to the same little village school and stuff. Kibbutz. So a gathering, communist village, kibbutz, gabatz. He lay down. Shakav, he lay down. He poured out. Shafak, poured out. Shafak. Chesed, covenant loyalty, favor, beautiful, theologically rich word, chesed. I'm the Lord, and the Lord's your God, abounding in chesed, loving kindness. Surely goodness and chesed will follow me all the days of my life. Mercy means loving kindness. In Ruth and in Genesis, it means some sort of idea of a covenant type of loyalty. At the end of Jonah's prayer in Jonah chapter 2, he says, those who go after vain idols forsake their chesed, forsake their loyalty to the covenant kind of idea. Because in that word chesed later on, it has this idea of a covenant relationship kind of thing. It's also that idea of mercy. It's also that idea of loving kindness. And it's a theologically rich and a very common word in the Hebrew Bible. Chesed. Mayim, water. Mayim, water. Notice it's Mame, Pathak, Yod, Hirik, Mame. Okay. Notice it's not the plural, not Hirik, Yod, Mame. It's Yod, Hirik, Mame. Y'all see that? That means it's dual. It's a dual word, like Shemayim is. It's not a singular, it's not necessarily plural, it's dual. Now, literally, dual means two, but in the Hebrew idea, water is a plural, water isn't singular either, it's something else. Kind of like the sky is the singular thing, it's also a plural thing, it's kind of something else, and it's the dual. Yam, the sea, the plural there is Yamayim, sea, Yam. The Mesopotamian water god, Yam. And a lot of that in the Hebrew Bible where the Hebrews borrowed words from the culture. Name things. Yam is a sea god. Olam means eternity. Olam. Kerev, inside, nearness. Kerev. Yeled, child or a boy. Yeled. Yeledah is a girl, child. And the verb version of that we saw on the slides. Yelad, to birth or to cause someone to birth, or to begot. Yelad. I remember that as a Yelad, a little lad, just a little lad, Yelad, a little bitty lad. Shani, 2. Shalosh, 3. Achar, other. In, so or thus. Bain, queen. And Achat is under. Achat is under. Any questions on the vocabulary? I don't have as many memory devices for you today. All right. No questions on the vocab? All right. Want to end the recording?